Welcome to Femme Furious, a podcast where pop culture meets a feminine framing. I am your host, Julia Rose Portela, and today we are avoiding the Max Z with our favorite nerds from Hawkins, Indiana, as we discuss Stranger Things Season 5, Episode 1. Now, before we dive into today's episode, let me tell you how you can follow the pod. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. However, in 2 weeks' time, we will no longer be on Spotify. However, we will be on Patreon for free option. You'll be able to watch and listen to every episode on Patreon for free. And we will be on Substack for free. So you will be able to subscribe to the pod on literally anywhere else. If you are somebody who currently listens on Spotify, you will just have to transfer over to one of the myriad other options. Apple, Podcaster, iHeartRadio, YouTube, all that fun stuff. So we will no longer be on Spotify. And if you want to know more, I posted a whole episode about it last week as I talked a little bit about Stranger Things and getting caught up and all that kind of stuff. So that's already on there if you need to go and look at it. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram and on TikTok at femmeandfuriouspod. You can also send us an email if you have any thoughts, feelings, opinions. I would love to pull that in, so please do. That is at femmeandfuriouspod@gmail.com. And there will be an option to join the Lipstick and Lore newsletter. If you go into the show notes for this episode, you'll be able to find a link that will help you get to that. Okay, let's take a chic peek at Season 5, Episode 1, titled The Crawl, written and directed by the Duffer Brothers. This is your general spoiler warning. We are talking about everything from Stranger Things up until this point. We are not talking about the play. We are not talking about episodes 2, 3, or 4. So if you are somebody who had a long Thanksgiving weekend and you're still getting caught up on Stranger Things, guess what? You don't have to worry about it being spoiled for you. We are only talking about Season 5, Episode 1, The Crawl today. Episodes 2, 3, and 4 will be coming out through the rest of December. So we'll talk a little bit about the schedule later, but we're only talking about that today, just Episode 1 and anything up until Episode 1. Season 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we are not discussing the play. So I know the play is out there. I know people are talking about the play. We're not going to talk about the play here because, number one, I haven't seen it. And number two, I think they're telling the story anyway through the show, which I had anticipated in a specific context. So we'll get more of that and we'll discuss more of the play as it feels relevant to the plot of whatever we're discussing on the podcast. Let's go into a vibe check because we've been away from Stranger Things for 3 years, long time. And my initial vibe check was super excited. I was like, oh, we're really doing this again, but we're doing it hotter, we're doing it sadder, and we are doing it with better hair. And I could not be more grateful to be back. On the feral factor, it's an 8 out of 10 for me. The episode itself was probably closer to a 7, if I'm being honest, because as many season premieres, especially one with a 3-year gap between seasons, the premiere was quite expositional, and yet a lot of the exposition really worked for me. It wasn't an overkill, and the way that it was delivered a lot of times felt clever, or I probably would have rated it lower if I wasn't like so excited to be back in the world and so excited to be back with these characters and with this story, really. So it was an 8 out of 10 for me because I was like really jazzed sitting down for it. The episode itself, I would say, is like an 8 or 7 or an 8, but my hype for it was like a 12. Like I couldn't wait to sit down and watch the episode. Who is this episode for? It is for people who love a slow burn apocalypse. It has been 20 months that this apocalypse has been unfolding since we opened the Hell Gate. It has been 20 months since the end of Season 4. It's been 3 years in real time. It's been 20 months in Hawkins time. This episode is also for fans who missed the OG group dynamic. You watched Seasons 3 and 4 and you were really missing the camaraderie of the group being all together. You know, in Season 3, Dustin is off with Steve and Robin and Erica in the mall. In Season 4, Mike is with Will in California. and Dustin and Lucas are, back in Hawkins, but they're kind of separated based off of what's going on in season 4. So, if you're really somebody who loved like season 1, season 2, Ghostbusters, OG group dynamic, then I think that this is a really great episode for you. If you're somebody who thrives with anxiety, Chef's Kiss, perfect season for you. It's going to be a great season of television. And Robin stands, obviously, and for obvious reasons. Now, here's my hot girl hot take. You can't outrun the past, especially when it's literally clawing its way into your present. But the only thing stronger than the metal band-aid holding down the upside down, the only thing stronger than that, the only thing stronger than a Demogorgon ripping a goopy dimension door through your wall is the power of found family. And that's what I think this episode of television really roots us back into, something really central to the experience of Stranger Things. All right, let's jump into this week's Femme Frame, where we will dive into our key feminist themes, herstory, cultural context, and more. And besties, today's Femme Frame is one that I have been itching to talk about ever since I watched Robin Buckley touch that radio dial in Stranger Things. Because the moment that she sits down at the squawk station, I knew we were on to magic. Now, we don't see her sitting down. We come into the series where she's already in there, and that's where we're getting our first exposition dump. But flipping on the radio later on, turning on Diana Ross to cue to the group that we are talking about the upside down and we are about to get a secret message, and then delivering her cute coded message through fun facts about Diana Ross, giving the code to the crew for the crawl, say that 10 times fast, she becomes a part of this giant, almost forgotten part of history. Maybe it's not forgotten, but I think I've seen a lot of people online talking about this in relation to Harry Potter and like this very, Kingsley Lupin type deal, Ron listening to the radio, trying to get any message about his family, all that kind of stuff. And all of that is maybe true, and maybe contextually this feels like a wink and a nod to that. But honestly, all of that stuff is derived from real history. And in this particular case, with Robin being the one to give the message, what it actually reminded me of before I even reached for Harry Potter, although I'm not the biggest Harry Potter stan, sorry, I'm just not. I've seen it, I've read it, but whatever. I actually was thinking a lot about All the Light We Cannot See. Now, if you have not read that book, it is a book, now also a TV show on Netflix, and it was quite well adapted, considering that a lot of things aren't adapted well. It is a show about a blind girl who is living in, I believe France during the Nazi occupation. And she has a father who's an art curator, and he's a part of a group that is helping to protect the art. And it's about her story, and a part of her story is delivering messages through radio during that period of time. And so it was what I was thinking about as Robin was doing this, because it is a piece of history. It is a lineage of women who used sound, not swords, not superpowers like Elle, not brute force, but a microphone and a code book, the static-filled wavelength, right, to fight and to resist and to save people. That, by the way, resonates a lot with me, and why I am no longer going to be on Spotify. So again, if you want to know more about that, you can go listen to last episode, which is our little quickie on the Duffers recommended episodes that you should watch before Stranger Things Season 5. I gave like a bigger deep dive on what's going on. I've posted this on my Instagram, on my TikTok for the page, so you can see a little bit more about why I'm making this decision to come off of Spotify, but it does have to do with my own ability of using my microphone as a form of resistance to what is happening currently here in America, but also globally, and how that resonates with me as somebody who really focuses on this type of activism. Even though we're talking about pop culture, this is my own sort of form of activism, and seeing Robin use this thing that she's actually really good at, this like quick talker, very witty. I loved seeing her at the radio station. Robin would make an incredible podcaster in 2025. And I loved seeing that she was one of these people who was a part of this movement as well. I felt like a real kinship with her. So in today's Femme Frame, we are talking about women in the French Resistance who were relaying messages under fake names. We are talking women of the SOE and the OSS who send codes and signals from garrets and farmhouses. We are talking about women at Bletchley Park who intercepted radio transmissions 8 hours a day. And we are going to be talking about women who use pop songs, poetry, and tiny linguistic cues as weapons. And what I love about Robin's storyline this season is that she becomes the newest link in this chain. So let's dive into it. Let's start with the concept of sound as resistance. Historically, women have been shoved into roles deemed quiet. They were clerks, they were secretaries, they were switchboard operators, they were typists, they were redactors. Oftentimes in World War II, they didn't have to talk, but they were the one reading and redacting a lot of the messages. So they've been put into these roles that are typically not in a position of conventional power and also in positions that tend to be a little bit more quiet. Because the patriarchy assumed that those roles were passive. But in an example like a redactor, some of those positions became the most powerful, especially during wartime. Women who worked switchboards, radios, telegrams, redacting, listening stations, they were wielding information. They handled information, the most valuable resource that you can have in a conflict, especially in a war. They listened, they translated, they sent messages out, they encoded, they decoded, and they did it all with a level of calm that men often do not possess. Women were trained to recognize patterns, they were trained to recognize anomalies and emotional cues in voices. So all of that emotional intelligence that we feel that we have inherited through many, many years, some of that was quite literally trained to women for wartime. And it became something that was able to be weaponized for women. That's part of why the SOE, which is Britain's Special Operations Executive, began recruiting women as wireless operators in World War II. The men kept getting caught. Anytime they had men on the radios, the men were just getting caught. The men stuck out. Women could move through villages, they could move through farms, they could move through city blocks, and they could do this much more invisibly. And they were able, because of the way that things were at that period of time, to carry radios in suitcases or in bags. They were able to tap messages under blankets. They were able to transmit from attics, which is what happens in All the Light We Cannot See. And they were able to do all of this while the enemy patrols walked the streets below. Sound was soft power. And that soft power was their survival. So I found 3 examples of women who used broadcasting like their lives depended on it, because quite literally it did. So one example is Noor Inayat Khan. She was a musician turned spy. Noor was a princess. She was a writer of children's books, and she was a musician trained in harp and piano. She had an almost etheric calm about her, which somehow made her one of the most effective radio operators in occupied France. Her code name was Madeline, and she transmitted alone, no backup, after her entire network was rolled up by the Gestapo. She worked for 3 months under constant surveillance. She moved apartments daily. She carried her transmitter in a suitcase that weighed as much as a toddler, and the Germans were triangulating her position every single night, and she still got her messages through. Her whole ethos was, when your voice is the only weapon you have, you wield it with everything you've got. Then we've got Violet Szabo. She was a courier with the stamina of a Marvel heroine. Now, Violet wasn't primarily a radio operator, but she worked hand in hand with the radio networks. She delivered intel, and she was somebody who helped coordinate wireless drops. Her missions involved relaying information across huge distances by bike. What makes her relevant here is she understood how radios work. She understood how fragile the networks were. She understood how crucial it was to protect the people on the airwaves. And women like her that had this kind of knowledge ran the living infrastructure that kept radio resistance possible. And then there were the women of the radio laundress. When I was doing this research, this part made me think of the BBC broadcasted into France through a program called Radio Laundress. And they would send coded messages, little snatches of poetry, riddles, wordplay, to signal their missions. Not unlike how Robin uses fun facts about Diana Ross to signal the directions and the mission for the crawl. In particular, imagine hearing a soft female voice come over the static at 9:15 p.m. saying, "The long sobs of the violins of autumn." And the resistance cell in France was like, okay, it's time. Because that line in particular from Verlaine signaled that D-Day was imminent. The women worked these radio stations and they were writing scripts, they were translating codes, they were reading them aloud with perfectly neutral intonation, and their voices were the cue that something enormous was about to happen. And all of that information was signaled through a broadcast. Now, after the war, men got the medals. Nora was posthumously recognized. Violet was posthumously recognized as well. But the thousands of unnamed women, the listeners, the interceptors, the coders, the typists, the analysts, they were written out of history oftentimes because acknowledging them meant acknowledging that women had been essential to modern warfare. And we can't let the men know that we were effective, that we were competent, that we were brave, that we were revolutionary. So let's talk about how this all kind of folds into Stranger Things, because this is where it gets delicious. Robin has always been coded as somebody who is good at resistance energy. She's been good at coding since we met her in season 2. Because she's funny and she's anxious and she's hyper-verbal, but she is also a great communicator and a decoder. She is the one who figures out when blue meets yellow in the West, all of this stuff that happens when we are watching the Stranger Things season 2 in the Russian code. She's a translator of vibes. She's the first one to sort of clock outside of Jonathan that Will is gay and maybe interested in having a peer-related relationship with her, where she can explain these things. She was somebody who studied Steve Harrington because of her fascination with Tammy Thompson. Like, she is somebody who pays attention. She is somebody who gets the vibes. And Robin uses her gifts to her advantage, especially as Rockin' Robin, this local radio station host. I think everyone has some sort of reverence perhaps for their radio station or their radio host. I know growing up, I listened to Elvis Duran. It's like you hold a power when you have that. And so using this to deliver, and I say that in quotation marks, the message that the government wants her to deliver, but doing it with sort of a sarcastic, snarky tone to it, and then using the station as well, like quite literally, to deliver a coded message to her friends and to the people that she is connected to with the Upside Down. I think that that's historically accurate and quite brilliant. So that is our femme frame for today. All right, we're going to go through our slay by slay. So the episode opens in the Upside Down. A couple of things. The de-aging isn't as great as it was with Elle last season, but I thought it was still pretty good. And I've seen some videos since then of Noah Schnapp's acting and getting really into character, and just the holding of his hands and the movement of his hands. He's a really intentional actor, and I thought him in season 2 was great. Will, I think, is one of the best performances of season 2. And so it's so great to see Will used this way again, and it's great to see some of this backstage footage of him as well. Okay, I also want to go back to last season when Dustin says the Mind Flayer is in control, Vecna's his 5-star general, the Demogorgon is his foot soldier, because we see the Demogorgon being his foot soldier and literally bowing as he brings Will to Vecna in this first scene in the Upside Down. Now also, as a little sidebar, In season 1, when they go into the upside down and they pull the tube out of the upside down like vine out of Will's mouth, I gag every time I watch that. And I will say, I gagged so hard, like a visceral dry heave. It grossed me out so much that they hook him up to this thing. We see his eyes roll back, and then they're pumping something into him. And I'm just curious if we'll get an answer on this, because what do we presume that is being pumped into him? Like, there's some sort of like pump liquid, and then we see it trudging through the vine, and then we see it going into Will's mouth. And we know at the end of season 1, he throws up the Demaslugs. So we know that there is something physically that's been pumped inside of him, and that thing that's inside of him creates dart later on. Like, outside of those two things, like, what is inside of him? Because they're not turning him into a Demogorgon. So what is the point of that Demoslug? And how does the Demoslug, can I call it a Demoslug? What does the Demoslug have to do with anything? I don't know. But something is getting pumped into him, and I'm curious if we'll get an answer about what that is. Then we go to the Wheeler's house. It is November 3rd, 1987. So much of the season has been like, it ends where it began, which means that the show is going to take place, this season is going to take place probably over the next couple of days. It is November 3rd in episode 1, in the crawl, in this episode. So I am presuming that this series will wrap up on November 6th or thereafter. I would say the big to-do of the series is probably going to be on November 6th. Why November 6th? Because that is the day that Will was taken 4 years ago, according to the show, right? It's been 10 years in the real world, 4 years in the show. So we get here at the Wheeler house too. We learn that the Byers are staying with the Wheelers. They've been living there for 20 months. It's a long time. Joyce is no longer working at Melvald's. Apparently she's not selling encyclopedias anymore. She probably lost that job when she just decided to skedaddle on to Alaska to go save Hopper. I guess Hopper is no longer part of the chief of police. I guess he just forfeited that role and then decided after he came back, no one decided to give him back this job. Like, are Joyce and Hopper working, or is their full-time job just watching Elle? Inquiring minds would like to know. So we learn that the Byers are living with the Wheelers. We also get a show of Mr. What's-It. Now, this is a gentle spoiler, so skip ahead like 30 seconds or a minute if you don't want to hear this. But that first outline looks like Vecna. It looks like upside down Vecna. Just being honest, okay? I'm just saying that. Just dropping that there. So we also see that Holly is reading A Wrinkle in Time. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the episode. And then it cuts to the squawk. We get Rockin' Robin. We get her little Rockin' Robin soundtrack. We get that her and Steve are partners in every way that counts. They're this dynamic duo where she's going through her script and Steve is doing the chicken and the applause, and they're just working together. They're so in sync. I love them so much. They are a platonic life partner couple. I love them. We also get this mention of like Jimmy Fast Hands Lee, and I have a few questions. Number one, why did he flee? And at what point in the timeline between them going into quarantine and Jimmy leaving? Because she says it's been about 500 days since you've heard Jimmy Fast Hands Lee, right? So 500 days. It's been 600 days since the events of last season. So 100 days into quarantine, he left. And I would like to know why. And I say this only because, again, potential spoiler, I'm not sure, this is more of a theory. There is an episode title in the second batch that will come out on December 25th that is called Shock Jock. And I'm thinking that we will maybe get some Jimmy Fast Hands Lee information during that episode. But I would like to know why he left and why it was 100 days into the quarantine that he decided to leave. We also get Robin delivering the speech. I've always got The Last of Us on my mind, okay? So it's giving The Last of Us a little bit. It's not the QZ, it's the Maxi or the Big Mac if we're going according to Robin. Robin tells us that the town is being quarantined after mysterious dandruff has floated up from the upside down. We don't know what it is. And I have a few questions about this. Because in season 4, there's 2 specific mentions of the upside down and like breathing in the upside down. So there is like this mention of Steve where he's like, it's getting stuck in my throat. In all the other seasons prior, they have had to cover their mouth. Even when they were in the tunnels in season 2, they covered their mouths with bandanas. So I'm thinking that a part of this directional choice has to do with costuming and the fact that you don't want all of your actors' faces covered up all of the time. In which case, I would love it to be more than just random medical checks to understand what is happening to them, which is one of the things that Robin says in her speech, where she's like, oh, we're getting these like random medical checks. Don't we just love those? To talk about the fact that they don't know what breathing this in is doing to them. And I just wish that there was either something that was happening to them because of this, or something more definitive that they understood and that they had built a vaccination for. Like Hawkins' lab in particular has been working with the upside down for years at this point. So I would just like there to be more advanced knowledge or understanding of like what this is, even though we don't necessarily know what the upside down is. Okay, fine, but I would wish that there was just more of a focus on these people and what they're breathing in. We also learned that the cracks to the upside down that happened in season 4 based off of the 4 kills. It was Max, technically, even though 11 brought her back. It was Chrissy, it was the kid on the newspaper with Nancy, and it was the kid on the basketball team. All 4 of those people died as sacrifices to Vecna to open his hellmouth. And those cracks in Hawkins that like converged at the end of season 4 into this like main spot at Hawkins' lab, we learn that those have been covered up by a big metal gate. So there is another hell gate or another mother gate, and it is in Hawkins' lab at this point. We also learn here that Vicky and Robin are officially dating. We see Robin dedicate a song to her, and it cuts to Vicky in her car listening and receiving this sort of like romantic gesture. We then cut to this like scene between Dustin and Steve. And Dustin and Steve are these center posts of feel good within the show. And seeing this tension between the 2 of them is just gut-wrenching. And there's been a lot of discussion around this from the Duffers in particular. There's like a few articles. And in one of them, the Duffer brothers said, and I forget which one said it, like both of these characters are feeling a lot of pressure. And I think in general, just like the cyclical nature of grief and what grief does to you is so profound and so deep and so rich. And, you know, there was this video that I was watching of Gayton, and who plays Dustin, if you didn't know that. And he was talking about the fact that, you know, in season 4, there's supposed to maybe be like a little bit of rivalry. And what ends up coming out is that there's, you know, just a lot of respect that Eddie and Steve both have for this character of Dustin. And Dustin says Eddie was one of the first people to really accept Dustin. So even though these 2 characters, Eddie and Steve, have had a profound shaping of Dustin as a character, he said Eddie is the first one that really tells him that like he doesn't need to change anything about himself to be accepted or to fit in or anything like that. And then he says with Eddie gone, Steve then is the most important person to him. And up until this point is one of the people that has probably had a most defining shaping of him. And I'm paraphrasing what Gayton says. And so, you know, he's like, my character, oftentimes as characters do, is pushing that person away. Because it feels like if he's not feeling his grief all of the time, then he is doing a disservice to Eddie. And we get the impression through these conversations that we get over the course of the episode with Steve and with Dustin that Steve has been trying to be there for Dustin, and he's frustrated because they've got all of this stuff going on. He's watching Nancy in this shit relationship and he's in love with her, and the world's ending and his best friend is grieving, and like all of these things are weighing, I think, so deeply on him. And especially for the older kids, you know, the younger kids are still in high school and middle school and elementary school, but for the older kids, you know, they're not even like getting the tension of we're supposed to be going to college and we're, Nancy and Jonathan can't even have an argument about going to different colleges because they can't even leave their quarantine zone to go to college. So they're all, I think, making the most of what they can. But I will say that everything that's been unfolding with Dustin in this episode, in episode 1, feels very much to me like a harbinger of death. Just being honest. I know not a lot of people are going to like that, but I think it's true. I think we are getting a lot of winks and nods to Dustin's death, and I will point them out as we go through this episode. But I want to talk about Dustin being the bard, because that is how Mike describes him in season 2, as he is, clarifying the roles of the party to Max. And that's when she's like, you need a zoomer. And he's like, no, we don't. So I want to talk about the bard, because that's what he's described as. So in Dungeons and Dragons, the bard is a charismatic and versatile spellcaster who uses speech and magic to inspire his allies, to control the battlefield, and to deceive enemies. They draw their powers from echoes of creation, weaving magic through songs and stories to create a wide range effect, from buffing allies to healing wounds to casting illusions and dealing with psychic damage. Bards are skilled in social situations, have a broad knowledge base, making them valuable to any adventuring party. So I think this is important for a couple of different reasons, and I want to talk about, D&D as we continue to go along through these episodes. But I think that this is important to understand that this is the role that he has been playing up until now, and now he is taking over Eddie's mantle. We don't know what Eddie's clarification or his role in the party was. So I think he was considered the dungeon master, perhaps. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't know if they ever really discussed it, but I think Eddie is the one that's hosting the party. That makes Eddie the dungeon master. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. That is just from my brain in there. But Dustin being the bard is important because Dustin has played a very specific role in the group, in the friend group, and he's often the peacemaker, the mediator, but he's also the one that always pulls the knowledge all together. He is the one that has used D&D to understand something about their world. And this is important. He's also the one that holds the lore of their group. And so in season 1, when Mike and Lucas get into their fist fight, Dustin says to Mike, you need to apologize because you hit him first. And he holds that to truth. He even says it's the rule of law. And what is the party if we don't honor the rule of law? So he has been the guardian of their lore as a friend group. He has been the one who has been our storyteller. He has been the one that, as an outsider looking into this group who doesn't have D&D knowledge, who is not fighting Vecna, who's not fighting a Demogorgon, right? He is the one that's delivering this information to us in a way that is digestible for us, the audience. And so he does it not only within the group, but he does it for us as an audience, as a viewer, to understand the lore and the mythology and really understand what is happening in the context of a specific scene by pulling it all together and by giving us the exposition in a way that's really fun and very story-esque, because that's just how charming Gaten is, and that's just how charming Dustin is. So I wanted to point that out there because I think the roles of the party are going to be important this season in a way that they maybe haven't been in seasons prior. But I also want to question, how often is Dustin wearing this Hellfire shirt? I would really like to know, because the bully, Andy, is like, I told you not to wear this shirt anymore. How often is he wearing this shirt? Is he wearing it once a week? As in this every week we would play D&D on this day. And so I honor Hellfire every week by doing this thing. Is it because it's getting closer to the period of time in which Eddie would have passed away? It's 20 months. I don't know. It's 4 months away until it's been 2 years. And so I don't know. I'm curious how often he wears a shirt that the bullies felt that they needed to say that. But I love that the party kind of comes to his rescue. And I love that everyone does it in their own way. In season 1, we get Mike calling them mouth breathers. And here he's like, I think you should kick his balls and pop his testicles so that his particular brand of idiocy can't reproduce. Something along those lines. And it was just so intellectualized which is how Mike comes across to us, very passionate but very intellectual, especially younger Mike. I'm not talking about, season 3 or season 4. I'm talking about season 1 and season 2 Mike. So we're seeing a lot more of that like emerge in Mike as we get back into his character, especially this season. I'm really, really enjoying it so far. Again, we're not going to go ahead, but I'm really enjoying how he's coming across this season. Dustin, even as the bullies like have him by the shirt, he straightens up and like gives himself another inch, and he's like going in with the sarcasm, going in with the poking and the prodding of the inflaming of the situation. But then Lucas, who was on the basketball team with these guys, comes over. He makes the reference to when Erica kicks him in the balls with a crit hit, which is great from season 4. So there's like a flashback to that, which I really, really enjoyed. But I think the scene is really important and it's really critical. And not just the bullying, but the aftermath of the bullying is really important because the show has been dealing with bullying from the very start. And we've seen the boys stand up to the bullies since the very first season. Again, mouth breathers. The bullying even goes so far that it's a pressure point between the boys in season 4 as Lucas decides to play basketball in order to go into high school without being bullied anymore. He's like, I'm tired of this. I don't want to be bullied anymore. So the events of last season happened when the boys were a freshman in high school. They are now juniors in high school. So we get that. We see Elle being bullied in California. We have this conversation between Mike and Elle where Mike is like, why didn't you tell me that you're being bullied? I've been bullied my whole life. We get the satanic panic in season 4 with the Hellfire Club as the center of like what to be panicked about. And so this idea of outsiders being bullied is a core text to the show and has been every season, right? Season 2, we get Zombie Boy. So it's hard not to be on Dustin's side as this conversation unfolds between him and the boys. We know that Dustin is taking Eddie's death really, really hard. And we know that Eddie left Dustin with a mission to continue to be the one to herald the sheep in, right? That's what he says. It's not quite that, but he says, be good to the sheep or something like that. The little sheep. So that was what Eddie was saying on his deathbed. We know that Dustin says in season 4, no one was nice to us. No one but Eddie. So hearing the boys tell Dustin to stop provoking the bullies, and Mike says, I think you're fighting 2 battles and you need to be fighting 1. And while I don't entirely disagree with that sentiment, grief, as I've said earlier, is a cyclical monster and a powerful one. And they tell him to blend in, and he comes back with this quote, which I thought was great. That's not what we've ever done. We stay true to ourselves. We're supposed to stay true to our friends. We stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. And of course, he's talking about himself here, that the party is supposed to stand up for him and support him and be with him and not tell him that he's provoking the bullies, but he's also talking about Eddie. He's talking about the fact that we're supposed to stay true to our friends. And okay, Will did not know Eddie. Will never met him. But Mike and Lucas were also in the Hellfire Club. And so no matter what Lucas was doing with the basketball team, these boys, like the Hellfire shirt was Mike's wardrobe in season 3. At least for a part of it. I'm sorry, in season 4, not season 3. We have this like incredible shot. I remember seeing like the promo posters of like Mike in the Satanic Panic shirt. So I'm sorry, Mike in the Hellfire shirt. So we have like the Hellfire Club has been a part of these boys' lives, and so they're supposed to stay true to their friends, but Eddie being their friend. And this goes so far as to like Mike jumped off the quarry to protect Dustin from bullies in season 1. Mike would have died if Elle didn't stop him. Mike jumps off the quarry to protect him. So Mike says, I think that this is one of the most critical scenes. And I think this understanding of it is really important because Mike was also right by Will's side all of season 2. That it's all gone to shit. Now, this is just going off of my memory. This is not going back and like doing a deep dive rewatch on all of this, even though I just rewatched the entire series for this podcast. But In season 1, when Lucas separates from the party to go off on his own, that's when the vans come from the kids, and that's when Elle has to like flip the van. In season 2, they are all separated. Dustin is dealing with Dart for a lot of the season. That's how he ends up connected to Steve. Lucas is focused on roping Max into the party, and Will and Mike are at the hospital for a majority of the season after Halloween. So they're separated. And then Elle is on lockdown. So Elle is like, no one even knows if Elle's alive or dead or anything like that. And that's when the Mind Flayer, when they are all separated, when the Mind Flayer uses Will to plan the Demodog attack. And then in season 3, we have Lucas and Mike. Are you down here? Oh, it's okay. In season 3, Lucas and Mike don't want to play D&D with Will. Dustin gets stuck with Steve in the mall, and the girls are off on their own adventures, and that's when Billy kidnaps, I want to say Vicky, but it's not Vicky. That's Robin's crush. Maybe it is Vicky. Maybe there was 2 Vickies. I don't know. And they start making the meat monster. Ew. And then in season 4, Lucas joins the basketball team, and then Mike and Will and Elle are all in California. That's when the Wheeler house gets shut up. That's when Elle ends up getting basically kidnapped and forced to go back to Brenner. And all of the kids are killed in Hawkins. Not all of our kids, but Max, at the very least, is being tormented by Vecna. And then there's 3 other deaths. There's the Satanic Panic, all of the stuff that's unfolding in season 4. And that's when they're not together. It's like when they come together, they can solve the problem pretty easily. Even if the problem is hard, even if the solution is complex, they just work together as a team. And so each one of them, as I assume in DMD, because I don't know, I've never played D&D before, like everyone's got their path, everyone's got their skills, and you're supposed to be combining all of those things as a party to complete the mission. I think that's how D&D works. I don't really know, because again, I've never played, but I think they just work better together. So when they're divided on an issue, it doesn't matter that they're physically together, like the party's still split because Dustin wants to do what's right and what's in integrity and also fight Vecna. And Mike, Lucas, and Will basically are like, we need to be centralized in our focus. And the more that you provoke them, the harder it is for us to do what we need to do because these crawls are highly illegal. So it just seems like they're divided, and I know that they're talking about like a physical separation. Like, I forget exactly what he's saying, but he's describing it in D&D terms, and he's like, we split up the party and it all went to shit because they couldn't make a decision on what action to take. And so I think that there's something in this, I think you're fighting 2 battles when you need to be fighting 1. I think there's something in a separation of the mentality of the group that is also really important and really critical. So when Dustin says they're not listening, it's not that he doesn't realize what's at stake. It's that he finds the core values of the party to be the rule of law, and he feels that Will, Mike, and Lucas are going against their rule of law. That's not how it's necessarily vocalized or verbalized, but that's what I perceive as some of the tension that's happening here. And this is a really, really tough scene to watch. It was really heartbreaking. Then we get the Elle training sequence. So we learn at the end of the scene that they're still looking for Elle. Something that I really hated from season 4 was, I don't even know the name of the guy, but whatever. The military guy is looking for Elle. They want to take her out. They want to kill her because they feel like she's the one that's opening all of this stuff. Obviously, that's not true. We also learn from this flyer that we see of Elle at the end of school that Elle is a Gemini. And Gemini rules over communication and wits, to which I will say, Elle having mind powers and Gemini rules over the mind. I think that's great. Elle not being able to put a sentence together after being out of the lab for 4 years feels really hard to me, really hard to digest as a Gemini. Geminis like language, so I guess it's part of her Gemini learning curve to learn language. I guess I got at what point during the 4 years, but she's been in school. She was in school in California. She's around people that talk in normal sentences all the time. I don't know. It's just my one girl's opinion. Okay. Then we cut to the radio tower. We're fixing the radio station. The radio is down. The squawk is down. And Murray comes in. He's a smuggler. Joel is a hotter one. It just is what it is. He has with him Gatorade. He has a peanut butter bopper, which I've never heard of, but apparently does exist. And he gives Jonathan a mixtape that we will find out what that is about a little bit later on. So if you know, you know. If you don't, you will find out. But he's pretty obvious about what he's winking about here. Yeah. Anyway, that's that. We won't get too deep into that. We'll talk about that in another episode. We get this great line from Robin. What is it about your presence that brings out their inner Neanderthals? As Jonathan and Steve rush up the tower to try and fix the radio station for Nancy. We also learn that Nancy is the radio station manager, which tracks. And I just love these looks between Nancy and Robin. Robin, as Steve's number one supporter, really kind of lays it on thick for Steve in season 4 when Nancy and her are part of the group together. But I also just love this idea, and this is something that we did talk about in one of the Last of Us episodes, conversations that women have with their eyes. Women just do this organically and better than anybody, I think, as a collective. And so, the two of them racing up and Nancy and Robin just sort of side eye look at each other okay, here they go. Because even though Nancy knows that she is the center of this attention, it is also annoying to her. It is also frustrating to her. And she acknowledges that with this sideways glance with Robin here. So I love that. I love when women communicate this way. It's really perfect. And I love when a TV show or a movie can convey those looks in a way that does justice to this form of communication for women. We also learn in the scene what a crawl is. Well, let's back up. We learn that there is a headquarters inside the Upside Down. They're stationed in the Upside Down. So in order to get them supplies based off of whatever that headquarters needs, they have to do a burn, which we saw them do in season 2. That was anytime that they would burn the gates, anytime they would burn the Hellmouth, the Mother Gate, sorry. I think I'm calling it a Hellmouth more in the town, but in season 2 they called it the Mother Gate, close the gate, right? So when we get this experience of the crawl, what is happening is the government is going to do a burn at the Hellmouth in the center of town at Hawkins Lab so that the supply trucks can go through the gate into the Upside Down and be able to deliver the supplies that they need to the Upside Down, to the headquarters there. When there is a burn, depending on how much supplies are going in and out of the Upside Down, the group that we have is able to piggyback into the Upside Down and be able to clear an area, one area at a time. They're checking for Vecna. So that's what's happening if you're you understand what a crawl is, just based off of the concept. But, that's what's happening in the crawl. Then we get this, sort of crawl preparation from all of the different groups. So Lucas, Will, and Mike are all gossiping about Dustin until Dustin walks in. And he knows that they were talking about him, and they know that he knows, and he knows that they know that he knows. And so there's this added tension to that. But then Robin comes on the radio station. She gives them the coded message about the crawl. And one of the things that I really loved was to see the tunnels under Hawkins getting used for something. That was a nice throwback from season 2, especially because out of all of the seasons, there's 4 seasons. The Duffers told us to watch 4 episodes. 2 of them were from season 2. 2 of them were from season 4. I'm not saying season 1 and season 3 were irrelevant. I'm just saying that there's something specific about season 2 that they wanted us to draw our attention to. And a part of that is in one of the episodes, and I believe it's Will the Wise. In one of those episodes is when we get Hopper flipping into the Upside Down for the first time, or that panning underneath for the first time. So that was one of the episodes. So I love that the tunnels are coming back. The Wheelers are the heads of their respective groups. So Nancy walks us through the semantics of how we get in and out of the Upside Down. She is using an overhead projector. She is we are going to be coasting at a cozy 30 miles an hour. And then Mike sort of walks us through the security details and the tech. So we're getting the Wheeler siblings describing to their respective groups how the semantics of this crawl are going to work. So we're getting the exposition of the crawl through this really fun way. Mike uses their D&D characters and has the van, and he's hey, Hopper will go into the Upside Down. Dustin and Steve will pull up alongside. They use their radio. You have to keep it at a specific frequency in order to make sure that you are not losing Hopper in the Upside Down. Because if we lose the tracker, we lose Hopper, we can't get him out. That's that. So we're getting that kind of exposition that they need to be following. Like the van on the right side up has to be following the van that Hopper is in the Upside Down, so that we know when he gets off, when he's done clearing his own. I don't know. So that's the exposition that we get from the Wheeler siblings. But we discover that she cannot go to the Upside Down with him until she gets her training time to under 12:30, which she insists that she does this episode. And Hopper is like, no. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So we get the end of this scene with Dustin saying, I want to see Vecna's heart on a platter. I just wish I could do it myself. And because Dustin is our bard, our charismatic, fun guy, seeing him go this dark is, number one, another harbinger of death. Like the Henderson Harbingers is what we're going to call them as we go across the season, because it just really felt to me like we are being set up for Dustin's death. I hope we don't. I hope we're not. But it just feels like we are. I don't know. And this was one of them. Like, I just wish I could do it myself. Makes me think that maybe he will get an opportunity to try and fail. I don't know. We'll see. Then it cuts to Will, who we see looking up at the sky. It's sort of spinning, and then we understand, through this conversation that Will is having his first hive mind vision for the first time in a while. And then it cuts to Holly, who's spinning on the playground. We see her talking to Mr. Whatsit. We can see through her POV that Mr. Whatsit is a person, but when Miss Harris, who, by the way, fun fact, was the Duffer Brothers drama teacher that they cast in the show, which I thought was really quite cute. Nice little sentiment, like nice little note. We see that through Mrs. Harris's eyes. Holly's not talking to anybody. It's an imaginary person. And so I kind of felt like we get there right away with the spinning and the Holly comp, but it takes a while for us to get there narratively with our characters. Hawkins Lab. We cut to the Hawkins Lab that's inside the Upside Down, and we meet Dr. K. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't fucking love this. I don't understand why we killed Papa, why we killed Brenner, only to introduce Dr. K. Because not only do I not fucking care about this person, it's like, I don't want to meet another person. Like, there are people that we meet later on, and I don't want to talk about them because I think it comes in in episode 2 more so. But there are people that we meet in this season that, like, are just seasonal part of the character flux, okay? That's just how a show like this works. We gain a person like Alexi, we lose a person like Alexi. Okay, great, fine. I don't want to be invested in Dr. K. I thought Dr. Brenner as a villain was interesting and compelling, and I think killing him in season 4 and replacing him with somebody that we don't know when we only have 8 episodes to invest in the rest of the story felt like a waste, when they should have just kept Brenner alive and killed him in the middle of the season. I don't really feel like his death did anything last season for us to be connected to Dr. K. And not only that, but I don't know. I just don't like her character. Like, Dr. Brenner had something sinister about him. Dr. K is like almost an annoying thorn in my side. I'm not saying the performance is bad, but I don't love this. I just feel like we should have just kept Dr. Brenner then. I would almost prefer if the lab fell apart because Dr. Brenner died, and now it's just been that this military faction that was looking for 11 has taken over. That would be interesting and at least contextualize his death instead of just replacing his character with somebody else when you could have just kept his character. I don't understand. We also get this fight-ish between Joyce and Hopper where, Joyce is like, hey, Ella's ready. You need to, let her be ready and let her go. And he basically looks back at her and he's like, oh, like Will, where you keep him wrapped in bubble wrap. And this is going to be important. I'm going to be honest. Hopper as a character is really endearing to me in other seasons, and I don't know if it's just because of the Lily Allen slander / all of these allegations about him sort of bullying and harassing Millie Bobby Brown on set. And again, the Duffers kind of said it's being taken out of context, or like being blown up or being blown out of proportion. So like I don't really know if it's just because I have a bad taste in my mouth for him right now and I'm like, ick, but Hopper's character and this like overprotective, don't let her do anything because Sarah died once. And I think that Sarah's death is really effective, so I don't want to say like it's ineffective, but you know, there's something about him that feels like possessive without empathy for her feelings at all. Whereas, you know, we see some of those pieces of empathy from him, especially in season 2, you know, where she comes back and she's like, bitchin', and he's like, okay, bitchin'. Or, you know, I left the door open 3 inches, like that letter, you know, for the sake of your old man, leave the door open 3 inches. I really think that there's some beautiful scenes that we get of Hopper, but then there's like these fights that he has with Elle over the use of her powers and what she's capable of and her autonomy feels so gross to me, and I don't know if I love it. So I don't love this fight. I don't love that he gaslights her that she didn't make the cut, but then tells Joyce she made it in 12:29 with a second to spare. I just don't love that. What I do love, however, is Mike picking Holly up from school. Now, couple of things to note. Number 1, there are 12 turkeys behind the 2 of them as they talk. So it's around Thanksgiving time. Again, it's November 6th. 12 turkeys behind them on the wall. Just leaving that there. The other thing I love is that Mike as a big brother is great. I think Mike saying monsters aren't real isn't fair. Another gaslighting, you know, man in this scenario. But I love that we get this comp of like Mike the brave versus Holly the heroic. And this line that he says, I was going to wait a few more years to introduce her to D&D, but he gives it to her now. And he doesn't like discredit the fact that she has a, you know, imaginary friend. He's like, instead of reaching for Mr. Whatsit, maybe you need to be Holly the heroic. And he engages her with her imaginary friend. He asks questions. He is inquisitive. Like he, you know, at the core text of the show is being inclusive and understanding that we are all different, and that our differences are what make us, you know, connected. He doesn't other her. He doesn't reject her for this imaginary friend. He just sort of redirects the energy and is like, hey, what about being Holly the heroic? And what I love about this is that he says Holly is a cleric, which I originally thought is what he called Elle. So the actual quote from season 2, he was like, I'm our paladin, Will's our cleric, Dustin's our bard, Lucas is our ranger, and Elle was the mage. So we have all of their roles in the party. So in D&D, a cleric is a powerful divine spellcaster who draws power from a deity or other immortal forces to heal allies, to harm enemies, and to perform divine feats. We also know through Mike that they can open a dimension door. So this is really interesting to me, which is why when he said that, I was like, oh yeah, well, Elle was also our cleric, because it's, you know, written in the text of the show that one of Elle's powers, which is what Vecna is seeking out through her, is the fact that she is able to open doors to other dimensions. So Holly as the cleric not only has this ability to draw on the power like Will is doing from this force. So it gives me some pause about whether, you know, what the full potential of Will's powers will be and if he's able to open a dimension door. But for now, we're getting sort of like a download of what Holly's powers are going to be, or what Holly's role is going to be. And something that I also think is really important here, just as like a little sidebar, a little side note, is for the entirety of this show, we have understood the context of what is happening through D&D. We have the Demogorgon, we have the Hydra Thessal, we have Vecna, we have the Mind Flayer, we have the Upside Down, we have all of this stuff that comes from D&D. I don't know if the Upside Down does, but the way that they are able to contextualize these things that are happening are through D&D, right? What I love about this is there is something in this scene about Mike passing the torch to Holly. And what has Holly been reading? A Wrinkle in Time. So not only are we now describing a character not as Vecna or a Mind Flayer or a demogorgon. We are describing a character that we have not met, that we haven't seen, or that we know that we're going to see, or whatever. We are getting that experience through Holly's sort of POV, or her understanding of supernatural things, which is Mr. Whatsit, which is echoing Mrs. Whatsit from the book A Wrinkle in Time. The other thing is, later on, there is an episode called Escape from Camazotz. Camazotz is where A Wrinkle in Time is taking place. So we're shifting and passing the torch to the next generation who may understand these critical experiences through different texts. And yet, they're doing the same thing in their childhood, in their limited scope of perspective and knowledge, putting understanding to story that makes sense to them. And so for Mike and for Will and for Dustin and Lucas, it was D&D because that was central to them. But for somebody like Holly, who we've seen with her nose straight up in this book the entire time, this is important to her. It's a critical text for her. She likes the story. And so that's an important understanding too. I really thought this was a nice passing of the torch in many ways. Then we get Will and Lucas at the hospital. Max has been in a coma for 20 months. Okay, we see that they're still talking to her, still connecting with her, which I really like. I, for the sake of my sanity, really, really need Lucas and Max to have a date at the movies. I really need Max to wake up for Lucas's sake. We see Will clock Rockin' Robin, and he's like, Rockin' Robin, even though they're friends, kind of. At least they run in the same circle. They know each other a little bit more intimately than just like, hey, that's Rockin' Robin. We see that he follows Rockin' Robin to go see Vicky, who is a candy striper, at the hospital. And we get this scene where Robin says, as a good friend once said, bad news first, always. And this is Robin quoting Eddie when they show up to the trap house where Eddie is stashed out, and they're just like, hey, we've got good news and bad news. And he's like, bad news first, always. So she's quoting Robin, she's quoting Eddie here, and it will also be interesting to see all of the ways, not just the Hellfire shirt, but all of the ways that, you know, Eddie stays alive through the spirit of the party, the extended party. And Will sees them kissing. And what this means to him as a queer person, he sees somebody embodying this thing that he would like to do and doesn't know really how to express within himself. And so Robin in this moment sort of becomes his gay mecca, his gay guru, and we will see maybe how that relationship unfolds over the course of the season. But Vicky and Robin know that they are caught kissing. And then we get Dustin at Eddie's grave. He is there with paint thinner. Apparently people for the past 20 months have been defiling Eddie's grave, but instead we see that the bullies have killed Jake the Snake like fucking psychos. We get another Henderson harbinger here where Andy says, Hellfire dies with you, Henderson, and it dies tonight. So not looking great for Dustin, just being honest. But Dustin, again, uses D&D. He's a bard, he's a storyteller, so he's buying himself some time where he's like, it's really funny, during the last game I was playing with Eddie, you know, I rolled whatever, and I'm sure that there's like important context there. Maybe I'll look back at this, but I don't play D&D, so again, some of this stuff goes over my head. He goes, and I, you know, cast the violet ray or the violet light or whatever he says. And they're like, okay, nerd, whatever that means. And he's like, it blinds you, and then takes the paint thinner and sprays it in all of their eyes. I just thought this was a fucking baller move from Dustin fucking Henderson. And I'll leave that there. He does get the shit kicked out of him, but I think he holds his own against 4 bullies pretty well for a pretty fair amount of time. And then it cuts to Mike and Elle talking together on the roof. They are acknowledging that Dustin and Hopper are not themselves, that there's a lot of pressure about what is happening, and that pressure is falling onto Dustin and Hopper. Elle asks Mike what happens after they defeat Vecna. Like, what happens when this is no longer a thing? And Mike says that when he plays D&D, the party can't return to their village because too much has happened. And so they travel to a faraway land, a peaceful land, where they all start again together. And I wonder if Elle, as somebody who can open a dimension door, or Holly as a cleric who can open a dimension door, or Will, who is noted in season 2 as a cleric and potentially has the ability to open a dimension door. We don't know. We haven't seen that. If these people who have the power to open dimension doors can they open one to a place that is not the upside down? And can this group of people who has experienced so much in Hawkins, can they go to a faraway place that's not in America or in the world, but go to another dimension, open a door to another dimension that isn't the upside down, and that is able to be somewhere where they can experience their peaceful ending in their faraway land with 3 waterfalls and whatever. So just something I'm thinking about as we move through the season. And then we get our crawl prep. Dustin's still MIA, mostly because he got the shit kicked out of him. Steve is prepping the tracking signal. And as he's prepping it, like he's, rotating the wheel, it flashes to like 88 miles per hour. It's not miles per hour, but anyway, it's a very big Back to the Future reference multiple times across the season so far. In this sequence as well, Hopper calls Dustin Inspector Gadget, which I thought was brilliant and fucking funny and really liked. And Will offers to fill in for Dustin, but Joyce says no and sends Jonathan instead. And not only if I was Jonathan would I be offended that I am more dispensable to my mother than my younger brother, but Will, like, how fucking annoying is it that his helicopter mom doesn't let him do anything, and that he, somebody who has experienced the most trauma, perhaps, maybe besides Elle and now Max, but like the two people that have experienced the most trauma and the most interconnected through the upside down are constantly pushed to the sidelines until they're not. And if I was Will, I would be really frustrated too. You could just see it on his face. He's like disappointed. He wants to help. He wants to do something. We go back to the Wheeler house where we overhear Holly listening to her parents argue over Mr. Whatsit. I don't think Ted is being unreasonable here. Ted is like, lots of kids have imaginary friends. I actually think this is the most reasonable that Ted Wheeler has ever sounded, besides maybe asking for the bacon earlier this episode and being like, when are they leaving? Because 20 months is a long time to be hosting another family. And then there is a line that's in there where, Karen says, do you even know how old your daughter is? And that line is for us, the listener, because Holly was, I think, 3 in the first season, but I think they're maybe trying to push it now to 5 and saying that Holly is 9 at this point, but she is being played by a 14-year-old girl, and she is certainly not 7. So I don't know what the actual math is, but we're just going to overlook it for baby Holly, okay? For as shitty as Ted Wheeler is as well, he's calling Karen out on her alcoholism. He's like, I'm not talking to you when you're like this. How many of you had 1 or 2? And she's like, what does it even matter? But it does when you're somebody who is an alcoholic, and you're somebody who's in a relationship with somebody who's an alcoholic, speaking from personal Dear Diary experience. So important to note here that we keep seeing Holly in rainbow clothing with rainbow things happening around her. Her pillow and her bedspread is rainbows. And her clothes are like all rainbow colored. So this is a throwback, I think, to the Rainbow Room and the kids that are gifted in the Rainbow Room, for whatever reason. So I think rainbows are important, and we should be paying attention to where we see rainbows across the season and who they're connected to. Then we get the crow's nest. The hand signals that Lucas uses are Disney hand signals for rides. I would know because I worked at Disney. So we have hold, which he does, and then we have clear, which I thought was great. I also liked the phrase he flipped, as in like flipped into the upside down. So I think that was a nice way of describing that too. And then the crawl starts to go awry as the van slams to a stop with Hopper inside. And they sort of like lose the tracker for a second, right? Like everything starts to go up in flames. And Will accesses his now memories to see the Demogorgon attacking in the upside down. In this sequence, Hopper gets grazed with a bullet. And I am thinking back to season 2 when Will, as the Mind Flayer, is like, they upset him. And he's talking about the soldiers who were burning the vines down in the tunnels. And he's like, they shouldn't have done that. They shouldn't have upset him. So is this Demogorgon attack provoked by the burn that they just did to get all of the supplies to the upside down? I wasn't really sure what was supposed to be provoking this attack, but like, why hasn't a Demogorgon attack happened in other burns? And why did it happen in this burn? I mean, I guess it could just be random, but anyway, that was something I was thinking about. The cinematography in the season is wonderful. Really, really great, really sharp, really clear, really focused. But this shot of Will sort of like spiraling out and then hitting the floor in like that slow motion, I fucking go gaga over that. So there's that. And then last but not least, we've got the sort of beginning of an attack at the Wheeler house. So Will comes back through to the present moment, and through Will's POV of the Demogorgon, we discover that the Demogorgon is going to fulfill Vecna's promise from season 4. He's going to kill the Wheelers. Karen is fucking drunk. She's finished an entire bottle of wine at this point. And then the episode ends with the Demogorgon ripping a hole through Holly's wall. Great. Great season. Great season opener. Love it. Love to hear it. So that is the end of episode 1. Let's crack open our burn book, where we will look at the superlatives for this episode. The Bold and Bothered Award. This is strictly for the Femme and the Furious. It is the quote or the moment that really relays feminine rage. And for me, it was Elle telling Hop to set it again. She's like, set the timer again. I want to beat the timer. The Shiro Award. The award that goes to the baddie who is the most inspiring, or the moment that is the most empowering. And to me, this is literally Karen Wheeler cooking for an entire family. She's cooking for her entire family of 5, plus the buyers. It's just a lot of people. And then she has to clean up. So anyway, the Shiro Award goes to her. No wonder she's drinking an entire bottle of wine. The Femme Fatale Award goes to the most smash the patriarchy moment of the episode, and I would also say this is Karen Wheeler calling out her husband for not knowing Holly's age. Speak Your Truth trophy. The best quote or line in the episode, Dustin saying, "We stand up for what's right, no matter the cost." That to me was a really great speech and really impactful. Honorary heartthrob, because I am just a girl, okay? And I want to talk about the swoon-worthy moments. And for me, it was Robin being like, I want to see you in this hat, and only this hat. Okay, Jack Dawson, Rose Dawson, whatever. I was like, yeah, I would be real into Robin if that was me. That was Vicky. Retro Glow. Best 80s nostalgia. There is Sunny D on the table at the Wheeler house, like a big thing of Sunny D, and I just thought this was chef's kiss. I could taste it in my mouth as it panned across. It was just a quick little shot of it, but I was like, I remember that. I remember the exact tangy taste that you would get, because it's not quite tangy like a regular orange juice. It just was like tangy with chemicals. It was great. Then we've got Boombox Bliss, which is the best needle drop of the episode. And for this episode, I thought it was the Diana Ross Upside Down. I thought that was so great. I was so excited to hear it. So anyway, that is our episode for this week. Thank you for tuning in to Femme and Furious. It's good to be back. It's good to be behind the mic again. If you like this episode, comment, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. I will be back on Friday. And until then, don't get flipped.